Did you know that the true monster of the labyrinth wasn't the beast, but the man who locked it away? We all know the story of Theseus, but no one has told you that the Minotaur wasn't born evil. He was born condemned by his own father's sin. Stay, because today we are going to discover the hidden tragedy behind the most famous beast in mythology. In the heart of the Mediterranean, the island of Crete stood like a jewel of marble and bronze. There ruled Minos, a man whose ambition knew no bounds. Though his crown shone brightly, his legitimacy was questioned in the whispers of the palace corridors. Minos did not just want power. He wanted the absolute and unquestionable blessing of the heavens. For him, the respect of men was insufficient without the favor of the immortals. One morning, off the coast of Knossos, Minos knelt before the crashing waves. He raised his hands to the sky and cried out to Poseidon, the impetuous god of the seas, "Give me a sign. Let the world know that I am your chosen one, and in return, I will offer you the greatest sacrifice these lands have ever seen." The sea, as if responding to his pride, began to boil. Suddenly, the waters parted in a roar of foam and salt spray. From the void emerged a figure that left the entire court breathless. A bull of blinding whiteness, with horns that seemed carved from ivory, and a strength that made the sand tremble beneath its hooves. It was a divine creature, a pure manifestation of Poseidon's power. The crowd fell to their knees, terrified and awestruck. Minos had triumphed. The gods were with him. However, as he gazed upon the animal, something changed in the king's eyes. Devotion was replaced by greed. Seeing the beast's perfect musculature and shimmering coat, Minos thought that such a bull was too valuable to be consumed by the flames of an altar. Why destroy such perfection? He wondered. His arrogance whispered that he could deceive the divine. Driven by avarice, he ordered the sacred bull to be hidden among his own herds, and in its place, sacrificed an ordinary specimen, thinking that the god would not notice the difference, or that, in his glory, he would not care about the swap. It was the costliest mistake of his life. Poseidon, whose fury is as deep as the ocean, watched the betrayal from the depths. The king had broken his promise. He had preferred material wealth over sacred honor. The curse would not be long in coming, not with storms or shipwrecks, but by sowing the seed of a shame that would devour Minos' lineage from within. Minos' betrayal did not go unnoticed in the depths of the ocean. Poseidon, the earthshaker, was not a god to forgive insults to his majesty. However, his punishment would not come in the form of earthquakes cracking the walls of Knossos, nor with giant waves sinking the Cretan fleet. The god of the sea sought something far more twisted. He wanted the very object of Minos' sin, the white bull, to become the instrument of his eternal dishonor. The punishment would not fall upon the stones of the kingdom, but upon the heart of the queen. Pasiphae, wife of Minos and mother of his children, began to feel a subtle but terrifying change in her spirit. What started as a strange curiosity for the animal wandering the royal gardens soon transformed into an absolute fixation. It was not a human desire. It was a divine poison injected into her blood. Each time the bull bellowed, Pasiphae felt a shiver she could not comprehend, a magnetic attraction toward the beast that defied all logic and morality. The queen, once known for her dignity and wisdom, spent hours watching the animal from the shadows of the columns. The bull's white coat, the very shimmer that had tempted her husband's greed, now fed a dark flame within her. It was a monstrous passion, a thirst that no goblet of wine could quench. The gods had not taken her reason. They had twisted it so she would be conscious of her own degradation. She knew that what she felt was an aberration, a shame that would stain her name for centuries to come. But Poseidon's will was an ocean dragging her mercilessly toward the bottom. Nights in the palace became a torment. While Minos slept, dreaming of power and the expansion of his empire, Pasiphae remained awake, consumed by visions of the beast. She did not fight the curse because no human was capable of overcoming the whim of a god. Instead, fear was replaced by a desperate determination. The queen decided she would not die with that desire trapped in her chest. If the world was to condemn her, If the gods wanted to see her fall, she would fall embracing her own madness. The decision was made. She would find a way to unite with the impossible, unaware that this act would be the origin of the greatest horror Crete would ever know. Pasiphae's madness had reached a point of no return. The queen, prisoner of a desire that did not belong to this world, understood that her longing was physically impossible to fulfill. However, within the court of Crete resided a man whose mind was capable of defying the laws of nature and the logic of men. Daedalus, the inventor, exiled from Athens and welcomed by Minos, was famous for creating automatons that seemed to breathe and mechanisms that defied gravity. To him the queen went, not with a request for wisdom, but with an order born of her desperation. In the secrecy of his workshop, Pasiphae confessed her torment. Daedalus, despite his cynical wit, was horrified by the magnitude of what was being asked of him. He was ordered to design a bridge between the human and the bestial, a tool that would allow the queen to consummate her passion with the white bull. The inventor knew that obeying meant becoming an accomplice to an act that defied the gods themselves. But the queen's authority and the technical challenge of the impossible outweighed his morality. Thus, he began to work on the darkest creation of his career. Using wood from the finest oaks on the island, Daedalus sculpted the figure of a cow. It was no simple statue. It was a masterpiece of engineering. Inside, the structure was hollow, precisely designed to house the queen's body in a specific position. On the outside, Daedalus's ingenuity reached disturbing levels. He covered the wood with the tanned hide of a real cow, taking care with every detail so that the scent, texture, and appearance would deceive the senses of the divine bull. It was a trap of flesh and wood, a machine designed for transgression. When the work was finished, the queen was led to the meadow where Poseidon's beast grazed. With her heart racing wildly, Pasiphae stepped into the wooden womb, sealing her fate. The bull, deceived by the perfection of Daedalus's artifice, approached. In that instant, the silence of Crete was broken by an act that mythology would remember with horror. The veil between men and monsters was torn forever. Daedalus, watching from a distance, knew that the machine had not only fulfilled a queen's desire, but had built the door through which the final ruin of the house of Minos would enter. The horror was only beginning. 9 months after that somber encounter in the meadows of Crete, the palace of Knossos was plunged into a silence heavy with omens. Queen Pasiphae's pregnancy had not been like the ones before. It was said that her womb grew with an unnatural speed, and that, on nights of the full moon, dull thuds and wild vibrations could be heard emanating from her chambers. The midwives, women hardened by 1,000 births, trembled as they approached the royal bed. There was a stench of old blood and stables that permeated the silk curtains, a trace of the divine mixed with the bestial that no essence could hide. When the moment of birth finally arrived, the horror overflowed. There was no crystalline cry of a prince, but a hoarse bellow that curdled the blood of all present. What came from Pasiphae's womb was not a blessing, but a biological blasphemy. The creature lying on the white sheets defied all classification. It possessed the robust body and limbs of a human being, but upon its shoulders rested the massive and terrifying head of a bull. Its eyes, dark and charged with an instinctive fury, sought something to devour from the very first second of its existence. Pasiphae, exhausted and broken by the curse, gazed upon her offspring with a mixture of maternal love and absolute terror. She called him Asterion, the Starry One, perhaps seeking in his name a spark of light amidst such darkness. But the world would never call him that. For the inhabitants of Crete and for history, he would be known as the Minotaur, the bull of Minos. The creature grew at an alarming rate, quickly losing any trace of infantile fragility. His strength was enormous. His hands, ending in thick nails, tore flesh, and his hunger seemed to have no end, rejecting milk for the taste of blood. Minos, upon discovering the monstrosity that lived in his own home, felt the weight of his betrayal of Poseidon finally crushing him. He could not kill the creature, for he feared awakening the god's wrath even further, but neither could he allow the world to see the living fruit of his dishonor. The Minotaur was a living mistake, a constant mirror that reminded the king of his own arrogance. The beast, locked in the deepest chambers of the palace, began to pound the walls, demanding freedom and food. The king understood that the shame of his crown could no longer be hidden behind curtains. He needed a prison as complex as the sin itself. The Minotaur was no longer a secret that could be hidden behind the walls of a bedroom. Young Asterion had become a mass of muscle and fury, a beast that knew no mercy and whose language was the bellows that made the palace foundations vibrate. The creature demanded flesh, and its mere existence was a constant reminder of Minos' sin and Pasiphae's dishonor. The king, cornered by the fear of his people and his own shame, understood that he could not destroy the monster, for it was blood of his blood and a divine punishment, but he could erase it from the world of men. For the second time, Minos called upon Daedalus. "Build him a cage," the king ordered, "but one from which even a god could not find the way out." Daedalus, whose ingenuity had already served to beget the monster, accepted the task as a form of atonement, or perhaps as the ultimate challenge to his intellect. He did not design a common cell, but an architectural work of terrifying complexity. The Labyrinth. It was an infinite network of intersecting passages, of low ceilings that oppressed the chest and cold stone walls that seemed to move in the shadows. The labyrinth was built beneath the foundations of Knossos, like a stone intestine designed to digest the hope of anyone who set foot in it. Daedalus applied principles of sacred geometry and optical tricks that confused the senses, corridors that seemed straight-curved subtly, and doors that promised an exit, led back to the same oppressive center. It was a three-dimensional puzzle where time and direction lost their meaning. The design was so perfect and twisted that Daedalus himself, upon finishing it, almost failed to find his way back to the surface. In the heart of this structure, in a chamber submerged in eternal shadows, the Minotaur was confined. The beast was led through the darkness and abandoned in the center of the chaos. There, Asterion ceased to be a sun and definitively became a myth of terror. The labyrinth was not just a physical prison. It was a mental prison. In the silence of the tunnels, only the dripping of water and the echo of the beast's footsteps were heard, as it walked eternally searching for an exit that did not exist. Minos finally breathed a sigh of relief. His shame was locked away, but in the darkness, the monster's hunger only grew. While the Minotaur waited in the shadows of his prison, the outside world continued to turn under the shadow of Minos' power. However, tragedy struck the royal house once again when Androgeus, the king's human and legitimate son, traveled to Athens to participate in the Panathenaic Games. His skill was such that he defeated all his opponents, awakening a lethal envy. Under dark circumstances, the prince was murdered by the Athenians. Upon receiving the news, Minos' fury surpassed any trace of sanity. He sought not only justice, but a humiliation that would be carved into the bones of Greece for generations. Minos besieged Athens with his unbeatable fleet until the city, on the brink of famine and plague, surrendered. The punishment imposed by the king of Crete was not gold, nor land, nor common slaves. He demanded a blood tribute that would feed both his vengeance and the monster he hid in the bowels of his island. The edict was relentless. Every 9 years, the city of Athens had to send to Crete 7 of its noblest young men and 7 of its purest maidens. 14 innocent lives destined for a death that no one dared to imagine. The day of the tribute became the blackest day on the Athenian calendar. The ships carrying the youth departed with black sails, a symbol of mourning that fluttered over the waves of the Aegean. Upon reaching the shores of Crete, they were not received as diplomats, but as livestock. Minos watched them from his throne with a cold smile, relishing the terror in their eyes. These youths were not taken to a swift execution. They were thrown to the gates of the labyrinth, where the bronze mechanism closed behind them with a definitive echo. Once inside, the horror began. The youths wandered for hours, even days, through Daedalus's infinite corridors, their feet bleeding and their minds broken by the silence. But they were never alone. Somewhere in the darkness, the Minotaur heard their sobs. The beast, hungry and driven mad by confinement, hunted them one by one. It was not a quick death. It was a feast of violence at the center of the labyrinth. The victims' cries were lost in the stone walls, becoming the wind that blew through the prison's crevices. Crete no longer ruled only by its fleet, but by the pure fear of a beast that devoured the future of Athens. Athens sank into despair every time the 9-year cycle came to an end. The lottery to choose the victims was a collective funeral. Parents wept for their children as if they were already underground. But in the midst of that darkness, a figure emerged who defied fate. Theseus, the son of King Aegeus, had just returned to the city after performing legendary feats on the road from Troezen. Seeing the mourning of his people and his father's helplessness, he felt that his royal blood was useless if he was unable to stop that slaughter of innocents. When the time came to choose the 7 young men for the 3rd tribute, Theseus stepped forward before the lot was even cast. He did not do it out of obligation, but of his own free will. "I will go to Crete," he announced before a stunned crowd. His father Aegeus begged him not to, for Theseus was his only heir and the hope of his lineage. But the young warrior had a vision that went beyond his own survival. He was not going to the labyrinth to die as a martyr, but to hunt the monster that inhabited the center of the world. Theseus was not a frightened youth. He was a hero forged in combat and cunning. Before departing, he promised his father that if he managed to defeat the beast and return alive, he would change the black sails of his ship for white ones, so that from the coast of Athens they could celebrate his victory long before the ship docked. Upon boarding the vessel, the contrast was evident. While the other 13 youths wept and said goodbye to their families, Theseus kept his gaze fixed on the horizon, analyzing every wave, every wind, mentally preparing himself for the unthinkable. Upon arriving at the shores of Crete, the Athenian prince was received by Minos' guard. Unlike the previous tributes, Theseus walked with his head held high. His bearing emanated an authority that even made the tyrant Minos hesitate for a moment. The news of his arrival spread throughout the palace of Knossos. A prince of Athens had come to surrender voluntarily to the beast. However, Theseus knew that brute force would not be enough within Daedalus's walls. Killing the Minotaur was a titanic task, but finding the exit in a labyrinth designed to confuse the gods was the true impossible challenge. What Theseus did not yet know was that, from atop the ramparts, a pair of eyes watched him with a mixture of admiration and pity, and that in those eyes, he would find the only key to his return. Among the crowd watching the arrival of the Athenian prisoners was Ariadne, the daughter of King Minos. While her father saw the youths as mere food for his shame, she saw in Theseus something she had never found in the corridors of Knossos, a courage born not of pride, but of sacrifice. As she locked eyes with the foreign prince, something changed forever in the princess's heart. Ariadne did not just feel love, she felt a profound pity. She knew that Theseus, however great a warrior he might be, was doomed. No one, not even the strongest of men, could defeat the labyrinth. That night, while the palace slept under a tense calm, Ariadne slipped through the shadows to the cells where Theseus awaited his fate. She knew that helping him was a direct betrayal of her father and her kingdom, but she also knew that the Minotaur, her own half-brother, was a monstrosity that had to end. Upon finding the hero, she handed him 2 objects that would change the course of history. The first was a bronze sword, short and sharp, hidden beneath her tunic. But the second object was much simpler and at the same time much more valuable, a modest ball of silk thread. "The sword is for the monster," Ariadne whispered with a trembling voice, "but the thread is for the labyrinth." She explained the secret that Daedalus had once confided in her. The labyrinth is not defeated with strength, but with memory. She instructed him to tie one end of the thread to the entrance of the prison, and to unroll it as he advanced toward the heart of the darkness. The thread would be his umbilical cord to the world of the living, the only path back through the web of stone deceptions. "If you come out alive," she added, "you must take me with you. I cannot stay in a land that feeds its monsters with innocence." Theseus accepted the deal and the gift, understanding that this woman was his true salvation. Ariadne's thread represented logic and love against the chaos and fury of the beast. With the ball of thread kept close to his chest, the Athenian prince felt the fear inspired by the labyrinth begin to dissipate. He would no longer enter the abyss blindly. Now he had a link to the light. Ariadne said goodbye to him with a kiss that tasted of farewell and hope, while the dawn began to stain the coasts of Crete red, announcing the day when a woman's thread would guide a hero's destiny. The bronze doors of the labyrinth closed behind Theseus with a roar that seemed to rumble through the very foundations of the island. The hero wasted no time. With firm hands, he tied the end of the silk thread to an iron ring at the entrance and began his descent. As he went deeper, the daylight turned into a grayish gloom, and finally, into absolute darkness. The silence was almost physical, interrupted only by the rustle of the thread unrolling and the echo of his own breathing. Theseus walked through corridors that branched infinitely, feeling how Daedalus's walls tried to devour his sense of direction. But the thread, taut beneath his fingers, was his only anchor to reality. Suddenly, the air changed. A rancid stench of decomposed flesh and wild beast flooded his lungs. In the distance, a guttural sound, a bellow that was neither human nor animal, made the stones on the floor vibrate. Theseus unsheathed the sword that Ariadne had given him. His senses were alert. Every shadow seemed to come to life. Rounding a final corner, he reached the heart of the labyrinth, a circular chamber where the remains of previous tributes lay scattered like trophies of an eternal nightmare. There, emerging from the deepest shadows, the Minotaur rose. The beast was more imposing than any legend suggested. Asterion stood upon his human legs, showing a torso covered in scars and a bull's head whose horns were stained with dried blood. Seeing Theseus, the monster did not hesitate. He charged with blind fury, a brute force seeking to crush the intruder against the stone walls. Theseus dodged the onslaught by millimeters, feeling the hot air the animal exhaled from its nostrils. It was not just a fight for survival. It was the clash between civilization and barbarism, between the order of the hero and the chaos of the beast. The combat was a macabre dance in the darkness. Theseus struck and retreated, using his agility against the Minotaur's massive bulk. The beast, accustomed to victims who only screamed and fled, grew enraged at the resistance. At a critical moment, the Minotaur managed to knock Theseus down, whose sword flew across the floor. With its head lowered to impale him, the monster launched the final attack. But Theseus, in a final display of strength, grabbed the beast's horns with his bare hands, using the animal's momentum to deflect the blow and recover his weapon. With a cry that contained all the pain of Athens, he plunged the bronze into the creature's neck. The Minotaur let out one last choked bellow and fell, collapsing like a mountain of flesh. Silence returned to the labyrinth, but this time, it was the silence of death. Theseus, covered in blood and sweat, sought in the darkness the saving touch of the silk thread. The monster had fallen, but the exit was still miles away. With his heart still hammering against his ribs, Theseus did not allow himself a single second of triumph. His fingers, trembling from the exertion, frantically searched the ground until they felt the soft texture of Ariadne's silk thread. That small bond, now stained with the Minotaur's blood, was his guide through Daedalus's infinite traps. Step by step, he retraced the path that so many others had traveled only one way, until a subtle change in the air temperature and a faint clarity at the end of a corridor announced that freedom was near. Upon exiting, Theseus was met by Ariadne. There was no time for pompous celebrations. King Minos would soon discover the death of his guardian and his daughter's betrayal. Under the cloak of night, the hero, the princess, and the other young Athenians who had awaited their fate fled toward the harbor. They sabotaged the Cretan ships to avoid pursuit and set sail, escaping the island that for years had been the epicenter of terror in the Aegean. Crete was left behind, dwarfed by the distance, while the labyrinth remained in silence, guarding the corpse of an era within its belly. However, the end of the Minotaur leaves a question that resonates louder than its bellows. When Asterion died, it was not just a beast that perished, but the living proof of human arrogance. The Minotaur did not choose to be born with the head of a bull and the body of a man. He did not choose to be the fruit of a divine curse or the object of greed for a king who preferred an animal over his own word. He spent his existence locked in a stone puzzle, without knowing the sun, companionship, or mercy. He was a victim before becoming an executioner, a being condemned from his first breath by the sins of his parents. The true monster of this story was not the one inhabiting the center of the labyrinth. The monster was Minos, whose ambition unleashed the wrath of the gods. It was Poseidon, whose vengeance had no limits or ethics. It was the structure of a world where the innocent pay for the mistakes of the powerful. Theseus returned to Athens as a savior, but Asterion's shadow would endure in myth as an eternal reminder. Often we create our own demons, lock them away out of shame, and then are surprised by their violence. In the end, the tragedy of the Minotaur is not his death, but the fact that he never had the chance to be anything other than the horror we ourselves invented. If you enjoyed this journey into the heart of the labyrinth, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Eternal Mythology. Now, I want to hear from you. Who was the true monster in this story? Was it the beast or the king who created him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time.